Welcome back to the Chi podcast. I'd like to welcome Stashia Jeanette from Ascension Oracle V. She has had an interesting life journey that began before birth, and that's her into many journeys, including health, shadow work, death and rebirth cycles, and now she helps others with their ascension process. So that could be someone that's early on their journey, just awakening to reality, and she helps guide them into a higher state. So welcome to the Chi podcast, Stacia.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you for welcoming me on board your podcast.
You're very welcome. So I thought we could start with a bit of your journey, like where it began and just kind of like flow into where it is now. So you shared
Yeah,
with me a bit around the pre-birth side of things and how that's kind of led.
that's how we got here. Yeah, so the entrance to the start of this incarnation has been kind of an interesting ride. I think a lot of people come in, I think a lot of people's fear in life is death, but like I came into the world experiencing death right out the gate with my umbilical cord being wrapped around my neck. Prior to my mom being able to give birth to me. So she ended up having to have an emergency C-section. And that whole process was interesting, and I give the joke where I say that it was me trying to abort the mission before it could start because like I looked at my soul contract like en route to being born, and I was like, hold up, this contract's looking a little this contract's looking a little different. It's looking a little long here. Like there's some things in here that I don't remember signing up to. Wait, why is that a solo mission? When I agreed to come here, that wasn't a solo mission. Why is that there? Who added this? Is essentially kind of what happened. And then I was like, oh, okay, see, so what's not gonna happen is y'all aren't gonna play me en route. And then anyway, so that's my whole joke into what happened because again, really it did. Like I came out looking like I strangled myself with the umbilical cord. So I was like, look, I really didn't want to, really didn't want to be here. But anyway, so then when they got me out, I wasn't breathing for 7 minutes, and my mom and dad said that I was like a little Smurf baby, like I was blue, and so they had to resuscitate me and then keep me in a little incubator with some sugar water because I apparently like I was born also hypoglycemic, which I still am now. So like I constantly you'll see me in a lot of my podcasts drinking orange juice or with a like a little apple juice box, like a little hummingbird. So coming into life was interesting and it set me on a different course of existence, a different path in my life right off the bat where I became very intertwined and connected to the spiritual world. Even from like being an infant, I remember being able to see like there used to be a soldier that would stand outside of my door in my nursery, and when I got old enough to talk, I would ask my mom like, "Who is this guy?" And she couldn't see him, but like he was there all the time, and I would see, my great grandmother, my mom's mom, sitting in the rocking chair with me, like at nighttime. So it was just something that I saw off the bat, and I'm gonna link it to that being how I came into the world. It started that process for me. It started me with having those abilities. So then from there at 4 was I would say the time when a lot of the rest of my spiritual gifts and abilities started to come on board through process of trauma or like having a really difficult childhood. And it's not even at the time that it was like a really difficult childhood. It was just my family was going through like a really, really rough time. And my parents got divorced. And then it was just a whole bunch of things within the home that felt like it was just a war zone all the time. And I was the glue. So from 4 years old, I became kind of the person that was holding down, my mom, holding down my sister. And then when my mom and sister couldn't get along and she moved out, it was just me trying to hold it together for my mother, all the time. And so I think that coupled with the aforementioned kind of also sparked off the spiritual gift things, because fast forward to now, I tell people that's usually how people's spiritual awakening happens, is it usually comes through some like really traumatic events or something that
Totally.
leads to it, that kind of like shocks your soul awake, like, oh my god, what's going on? So I think that's what really started up a lot of my spiritual gifts and abilities from go right there.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear a lot of people have near-death experiences and then come back with, a little bit of grounding in the spiritual realm and having, different clairaudience, sentience abilities. So it does make sense that prior to birth, having a near-death or close to death experience, that could infuse with you. And certainly the upbringing where things are difficult and then you're the kind of the anchor point. It's a lot to thrust on a 4-year-old as well, isn't it? To
Right,
have
right.
that level of responsibility at such a young age.
Yeah. And I think that's why now, like, a lot of people, they'll be like, "How old are you again?" And I'll tell them, they're like, "Oh, because like you're really mature." And I'm like, I had to, like, I didn't have any other choice. But if you, I tell people this often also, like, everyone asks me, how did you maintain your faith and ability to keep going at such a young age? And it's because you have the option, I think, when you go through kind of traumatic things at a young age, or you have a difficult upbringing or something of that nature. You have the choice to either like cling to your faith, or cling to the divine, or all you know, your faith, or you can like abandon it, and really young, because that's all I had when my mom was at work, and I wasn't in contact with my dad frequently, and my sister wasn't at the house. It was just me all the time. Like, I got really really close with just the spiritual world, and I got really really close with knowing God's source universe, and I got really really close with knowing my spirit team. That's all I knew. And so it was, I would say it was rough, but like, again, hindsight of looking back, like, it was a really big blessing in disguise, because it equipped me with a lot of, I say it like it was a training ground. My childhood home was definitely my training ground, and it's where I learned my gifts and abilities. It's where I learned who and what I was. It's where I did a lot of my battling and my fighting and my wars, really honestly. And I think if I had to do it again, I would do it the exact same way, because it really did equip me to be able to handle the not only the gifts and abilities that I have now, but to be able to handle the world and the people, and understand very compassionately, empathetically, people, their wounds, their triggers, things that they've gone through. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of right now the world's people, is they didn't have that. You know,
Yeah,
and then they just hop into the role of like, I'm your teacher, I'm your guide, I'm this, and and it's kind of like trying to have a holiday dinner with no substance. There's no ingredients in it.
I think the lived experience is really key because so much wisdom can come from actually living an experience. And, the what you were describing there, going through that, preparing you for now, it's kind of like training with 100 times gravity on, when you can find inner stability amongst the chaos and the
Exactly.
darkness. Then when you remove that kind of external weight, then, you can really rise above it. And I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? Like, when things are going good, it's easy to maintain one state, but it's when things are tumultuous and things aren't going to plan that really creates the solid character.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, I think it's also this thing of where people will feel often like, if everything is going great, everything is going according to plan, but like it's like when things start going bad for them, they're like, this is why is this happening to me? And then, like, it's also part of the plan. Like, you can't
Yeah,
just, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just take the good part of the plan and that's it. Like, it's is all a
Yeah.
part of it, is all part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like being able to recognize, I guess, accepting what is, but also for people maybe earlier in the journey, recognizing what of that they're creating themselves. Because, you know,
Hmm.
when you lack awareness, you can be creating the circumstances of your life and go, oh, why is this happening to me is typically the attitude.
Yes.
But then 5 years down the track, you look back and you're like, I see that that was what I was putting out that was creating those realities.
Yeah. Yeah, your energy, and that's why having self-awareness is like top tier vital key, because if you don't know yourself, and I know people don't like to sit with themselves like in solitude and silence, just to be with their own thoughts, just to be with their own feelings, just to like check in, how am I doing? How is my body? Am I okay? Is this okay? A lot of times people don't like doing that because they don't like the answers or the thoughts and feelings that come with it. But it's so important to do those things, because if you don't, then you're liable to keep doing the repeat thing. I say often, my little slogan is evolve or repeat. And you will keep repeating the same chapter, the same lesson, the same scenario all the time, until you go and have that awareness and that introspection to be like, now hold up a second. Why does this keep happening? Why is this happening so often? What is causing this? And then you sit with yourself and you're like, well, why do I keep making the same choice?
Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way? What is it in me that's making me feel like I need to keep choosing the same partner, the same job, the same addictions, the same whatever case may be? But like it only comes from, again, like doing this introspection and having that self-awareness and knowing who you truly are and what are your triggers, what are your fears. You have to sit with that stuff and unpack it. That's the only way that you can get out of the loop, because I mean that just is.
I think in the beginning, people look at those things, the partner, the job, whatever it may be, and they're like, these things are the problem. They shouldn't have treated me like that. This shouldn't have
Right?
been like that. But then with enough repetitions of that pattern, then it just gets to a point where they can't even refuse the evidence that, okay, this keeps happening in all different varieties, the same tune. I think I now have to look in, because when there's smoke, there's fire, when all arrows are pointing in. And it's just a matter of how many arrows need to point in before you can look at that. And I think the more you go on your journey, the quicker you're able to recognize patterns. And it goes from, 5 years down the track of having three of the same relationships to then looking in that you can actually get to a point where on the lead up to that relationship, you're like, this has the exact hallmarks of what I've done in the past. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to entertain that. While also recognizing it's not just about not choosing the thing, it's about what within you needed to heal from that dynamic.
Exactly. Exactly. What is it within you that needs to be changed, or needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be tweaked and healed, right? And that is something, and that's why I said, early on, that I'm really really grateful for my time in the abyss and in the darkness, because I did that, not only just with my, with partners or things of that nature, but like when I was going on with my health stuff, when I was having my health issues, I was forced to, essentially, my life was, I had a year surgery to two surgeries every year.
Wow.
Then when I wasn't having a surgery or recovering from a surgery, again, I was, in and out of like doctors and hospitals. And the time that I was in hospital rooms, I would just frequently sit in there, like in the darkness with nothing on, just contemplating, trying to figure out, why is this happening? Why is this familiar? And then I started noting like the dates. Like, oh my God, last year around this same date, I was in this exact same hospital. What's happening here? And I would notice the patterns, and eventually, I think it was the second year that I noticed, the same months something would happen, where I would either be in the hospital or have something going on, and I'd be like, what's going on? And I sat in the hospital, and I remember my nurse coming in and asking me, like, why are you in the dark? What's going on? You want me to turn the lights on? And I got mad at her because I was like, no, I don't want the lights on. I was like, I'm trying to figure something out. And I, and I'm pretty sure she thought I had just completely lost it. I was just super mad or something. But it was me trying to put together the pieces of like, what is it that's happening? What am I doing? And I remember saying that exactly. What am I doing that keeps putting me? And essentially, it was me like pushing myself beyond my limits of exhaustion. And then it was God's source universe intervening and being like, since you won't sit down, here's this that you now have to deal with on the physical aspect. And now you can't do anything. Right. So like it
Yes.
was a whole lot of things on top of it. Was like the one scoop of ice cream was the okay, you're not listening, and then the other scoop of ice cream on top of it was, well, you were making the same decision, and then the final scoop on top of it was, you're not supposed to be doing this, and this isn't the path for you. It was a lot, but it took me frequently, a lot of times throughout my life. I mean, Jesus, like 20 years, the 20 years of my life going frequently and asking myself, what am I doing? Why is this happening? And recognizing the patterns. And again, if you're not cognizant, if you're not aware of these patterns, that again, if you're not aware of yourself, but if you're not aware of your surroundings, and if you're not aware of your patterns, like it's almost near impossible to get out of that rabbit hole and that loop. And people ask me that frequently. How did you do it? How did you get out of here? How did you change? It starts with that. It starts with that awareness.
Yeah, that's so powerful because I can resonate with on many levels. The especially not listening to the body,
Yeah.
I guess getting caught in the mind. And it's difficult, let's say, in this society that's projecting, success and getting ahead and all of these things. And because of that, you might have your limits here, and success might require this. So you're like, well, I just need to do the things for success. I need to go and run 10Ks a day. I need to work 18 hours a day and, have 5 hours sleep, and I'm just going to push and make it happen, because that's what many people seem to be advocating to get ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you commit to that, if your body then starts to show symptoms or speak to you, but you're not having enough stillness to be aware of it, maybe you're neglecting the self as well, that you create no time for yourself and you're all in the doing state. Over time, this suppression of self and the neglection of the body is going to manifest in physical health issues.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's a lot of what has happened with me. But also another one of the complicating factors of it was me having the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome,
Mm,
and also on top of that. But the issue with it is that at the time, when I was 14 years old was when like all of my health stuff started happening. So at 14, back at that time, a lot of the doctors didn't recognize Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as a legitimate thing, an actual thing, and they were like, "Oh, you're just double jointed, that's it. You're just double jointed." And then the ones that wouldn't say, "Oh, you're just double jointed," would say like, "That's not a real thing, like that's just all in your head." Or a lot of people didn't even know that was a part of it, so they would know about having kind of what's it called, dysautonomia or positional orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS
POTS.
syndrome. Yeah. They knew about the POTS thing, and they were like, okay, well, we can treat that. That's a real thing. But they didn't want to accept that was a part of Ehlers-Danlos.
And can
So,
you just briefly explain EDS for those that may not be aware of it?
yeah. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a rare connective tissue disorder that essentially, like, your connective tissue is essentially everything from your head to your toes. Like, you have it internally, externally, from head to toes. And so, that being the case, essentially everything from head to toes can be affected inside and out. And a lot of it affects your neurological system. And your sympathetic nervous system also gets frequently triggered and affected by it. But for a lot of us, it frequently causes us to have hypermobile joints. So we get a lot of subluxations, dislocations of joints, instability. For me, that was something that I was going through often, but you can also have a lot of GI symptoms and essentially every kind of symptoms. I mean, I had the neurological things going on, and then they thought that I had Crohn's disease. So I was being treated for Crohn's for essentially up until last year. And then we came to the realization that like, wait, you don't have Crohn's, because I opted to just get off of the medication because it was giving me low white count, or I forgot what they called it.
White blood cell count?
Yeah. So anyways,
Neutropenia? No, that's not.
Neutropenia, that's what it is. Yeah. And so I was like, look, I'm not comfortable being on these biologics anymore with my white count being this way. And so essentially I went against medical advice and took myself off of it. And then, ta-da, magically, everything's better. And then all the doctors were like, well, she's been off of the biologics for a year now, and nothing's happened. And, they all tried to fearmonger me into not getting off of the medications, which I got off of all of the medications. And that was something that was playing into really effing me up with the Ehlers-Danlos stuff. Hindsight now, again, right? Because it's been about 2 years. Let me see. I made my documentary in 2022. And in 2022, I didn't have like the full proof that I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So like I named it diagnosis uncertain, because like I didn't really know like for sure if that's what it was. Yeah. So essentially 2023 was when I kind of got the full solid like, oh, I have hypermobile EDS. And it kind of changed the perspective. And then it was really heartbreaking. Like when I looked back, there's such a long list of stuff that you don't do for people who have Ehlers-Danlos. Like it doesn't matter what type, but like if you have Ehlers-Danlos, there's like a whole no list of things, like medications you don't put them on, things that they can't do for a long amount of time, things that they just shouldn't do. And if they're in a hospital setting, like which is simple routine procedures, there's like an entirely separate list of things that they should not have done to them, right? It's like a whole big protocol of things. And so every single time, like I've had to be resuscitated, like clinically resuscitated 3-4 times now. Anyways, more than 3 times at this point, because these very simple, like one of them was a gallbladder surgery, and I forgot what the other one was. That again, because I've had 17 surgeries in my life, I'm like, which surgery was it this time? Anyways, one of the 17 other surgeries, it was like a simple procedure that I had went in, but the most recent one was the gallbladder. And I was in the recovery, so the actual surgery was fine, but I was in the recovery room for it, and something happened. Again, nobody wants to like give the actual details of what it was that went on, but like I started like coughing up blood and like going into convulsions and things. And then they kept coming over and like giving me some medicine to like pass me out, to like knock me out so that I wouldn't disturb the other patients who were coming over to try to figure out what was happening. Anyways, long story short, they ended up having to do the compressions, and kind of bring me back to life. And the hindsight of it was because they didn't follow the protocol of the things to not give me or do to me during a surgery with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it almost cost my life, but multiple times, like, because nobody took it seriously. And so that's like a huge thing, and it sucks when you're young and you're trying to advocate for yourself in general, but then when you're trying to advocate for yourself for something that doctors don't want to take seriously and like really acknowledge, it was insane. And then on that, there was so many medications like the SSRIs and benzos and things that they had me on that were messing me up big time, like big time that I wasn't aware of. And I was on 25 medications at one time, literally like 25 very heavy hitting medications all at once at one point in time, and nobody could get on the same page with whether or not these were conflicting medications. Was it okay for me to be on this? And then also nobody wanted to acknowledge that I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It was literally like a burning out of control fire, and everybody was just like willingly watching it burn. But while all this was happening, I was also going through like a whole bunch of death and rebirths, like in the spiritual as well. I was getting it on both ends, it felt like. But it was a process of me going through the ascension and the rising and peeling away a lot of parts and aspects of me that didn't need to be there any longer. And then it was like preparing me to get to the point to where I could be like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm here to be doing, and I'm okay. So at some point I did get to the stability within myself to say, well, since nobody else can get on the same page with what it is that I do and don't have, I'm going to go ahead and take myself off of the medications. Again, against medical advising. And I'm not advising anybody, like I'm not a medical professional out here. I don't advise anybody to do what I have done, but that in general was probably the best decision of my life, because as soon as I got off of all 25 of those medications. Again, it wasn't just like at the same time, but it was like over a course of the year that I weaned off of everything. I started to get better and I started healing. And then like now I'm here, right? And everything is different, but it very much feels like I've just been in like a frozen capsule, like in a time capsule, because I got put on all these medications from 4 years old. So like from 4 to almost 30, I really was very much out of touch with like my body and everything that was going on. And people who have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in general have a difficulty with proprioception in general, being connected to the body. But like it was 10 times worse when you have so much clouding your connection to body and spirit. So getting off of everything was probably the best decision of my life.
Yeah, wow. Something I'm really passionate about is how our physiology can be affecting our state. And let's say you have EDS and you think, oh, well, what's wrong with me on a self level? But there was actually a condition that you had that you weren't living in alignment with because of the medical community not being able to actually highlight to you through lack of awareness or whatever it may be. You could really take that as a personal, oh, well, there's something about me. But then, yeah, there's your body and the physiology having an effect on you that once you calibrate for that, things come into alignment.
Exactly. And it was like, I remember it being the scariest moment of my life, because here I had all these doctors, people with the PhDs and titles in front of their name. And I'm not saying all the doctors are bad, because they're not, but I had a lot more that were not helpful and were not for me trying to heal than I did those who were like, yeah, let's try to just get you off of it, and let's try a more like homeopathic, naturalistic way of doing things. I would say I had maybe 5, if at that, of those out of the 3,000 or more that I've seen. So, right. So it was definitely a lot less, but, I felt more, I felt more afraid of going against what the doctors were saying, because they were giving me the fear mongering thing. If you get off of these medications, you've been on the SSRIs and this and the benzos and this and that and the third. That was the most that I got it from. And don't get me wrong, like I get it, because it is very much a door of, usually once you get on these medications, like you're usually on them for life. So I get it why they're saying it, because again, getting off of it was rough. It was rough, but
Did you do a taper with the benzos?
yes, but it not as long as I probably should have. It was definitely like within a 3-month period.
Yeah, and how long had you been on them for?
A while. Like,
Yeah, so it's pretty rapid in terms
yeah,
of
like
what it traditionally would be.
usually I think it was like 5 years that I was on them.
Yeah, wow. Yeah,
Right.
but what it sounds like to me is there was intuitive sense, and perhaps like, you know, when consciousness is coming through you,
Hmm.
sometimes that just automatically allows you to make the right decisions that are right for your body to support that.
Yeah.
And so it almost sounds like that what was coming through at the time, you know, whereas for another person that's like, hey, I want to get off benzos, maybe for them they need to do a little bit more of a slow taper
Right.
while listening to themselves.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But like I had the thing of God source universe asking me frequently, "Do you trust me? Do you trust me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you all I got. You all I got. This is all I got." Like, yeah, and it's like it's time. You don't need to be on this medication because you're not sick with the things that they're telling you have. Like you're not broken, like you're fine. And that's something that, again, where we were talking about, you can kind of be your own worst enemy, because I was taking the narratives and labels and stories and things that these doctors were telling me that I had, and then them telling me, "Oh, you can't get off it, otherwise, you might die, and you can't, you've been on it too long, and this, that, and the third." And so, but I really did. I had to just listen to myself and my guidance. And if I'm also being 1,000% honest, like, I know it sounds morbid, but like this is literally the truth. And like I try my best to be honest about my progress and my journey, my process and my journey, because I'm not one of those people that tries to portray like everything was just perfect, because it wasn't. But a large portion of me was also, I felt like, hey, if I die, I die. Because for me, it felt like I was existing, but I wasn't alive. Do you know what I mean? And I felt almost like it was better for me to take the risk of potentially dying and then just incarnating another time than continuing on the way that I was existing. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, that was a gamble that was worth me taking, rather than continuing to exist in essentially like a zombie like state, or like in like a bondage, like a like a slave to a world that I wasn't even a part of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, the choice of potentially having soul freedom rather than being a slave to medication was worth it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. You know, on the doctor dynamic, would you say it sounds like the doctors that were the doctors that were advocating for your healing versus the doctors that were kind of like, no, fear mongering, you should stay on the medication. I think, you know, doctors can get caught in this kind of, I'm the doctor, this is the patient, this is what we do, this is what you
Yeah.
should do. And they just stick to that. Whereas the fewer doctors that you described that were really for your healing, I guess they still had like a bit more groundedness in their desire to really help someone see your pain and be like, look, what I think would be best for you. Because the former one I described, they can be like, look, this is a system. I don't want to get caught up in any legal issues. We're just going to stick to what we know. But the problem with that is that often comes at the cost of progressive things that might be what you need.
Exactly. And again, I do, like, I see it. It's almost like the blessing and the curse of my having a lot of my gifts and abilities. One of them in particular is being able to kind of see where people are in an impossible situation by the strings and ties that they are bound to. And I saw a lot of that within the doctors that I was seeing, where it's almost like they kind of sign their name in blood on a contract of, I have to do it this way, because my master says so, and otherwise, my life and my family's life is on the line. If I don't comply, or if I'm not doing this way. Like, I saw a lot of fear behind a lot of the doctors that were afraid to say, like, I think this is probably what's actually happening, and yeah, you don't really need to be on this medication. You know what I'm saying? Rather than trying to like stick their neck out for me and actually tell the truth and do the right thing. While again, for me, like, it was pretty shitty. But like, I also saw it from the perspective of like, why are they doing this? Because I could see it. Like, I knew a lot of time, I knew these doctors were playing me. Like, and I knew they were BSing. I knew they were BSing. I'm like, you really don't know what's going on here, and they knew, but they just couldn't say. They didn't want to say, and that's the choice that they made, but it's like I said, it's a really rough situation to be in as a patient, but I saw it from all the angles, and again, the ones that were kind of like, maybe you should just try to like remove some of these medications. Like maybe this is causing conflicting side effects or what have you. Maybe we can look into that, maybe we can look into removing some of these things. They just were different. You know what I'm saying? Like they were different because they weren't afraid.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's
Like I didn't
totally.
like there was not a lick of fear within them. It was the kind of not a lick of fear that I had where I was like, "Hey, if I die, I die." Like, you do know what I'm saying? That's
Totally.
the this is those five doctors, that's the same mentality and energy that they were in where they were like, God source universe has got me and it's going to be what it's going to be. Period.
Yeah. I have often thought of the kind of saying, quote, doing what's right isn't always easy, and what's easy isn't always right.
Exactly.
And it's interesting to see of 3,000 doctors, five were doing what was right. And, this can manifest as you're walking along the road and you see someone like an old lady trip over in a busy street and you're like, oh, someone else has got that. And everyone has that mentality. And then,
Right.
hundreds of people walk past them. But then that one person's like, no, I'm going to be the one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I feel like that's kind of what was happening. Like all these everyone saw me. They knew, and I got access. I don't know how I got access to these records, but like I got access to this one record and the doctor's notes about me were on it. And I was like, let me indulge. Like yeah, right. Because it's me. Like it's not like it was somebody else. It's me. It's my, they've done a really good job of trying to red tape me out of my own history. But this one particular thing was here and I was like, let me pull this up. And I looked and this one doctor had it in his notes where it said something along the lines of like, this patient is on all these different medications with conflicting side effects, and the way that she's going now, she's at risk for essentially, I forgot what the medical term was for it, but essentially like correct, spontaneous combustion at any moment, essentially is what it said. Need to be on high alert for this. But then like and then that was it.
And
So
so that was the documentation, but the in-person consultation was like, well, keep taking the medication.
literally this is literally exactly what it was. I remember for so long, like I had it printed out and I just sat here and I was looking at it like, but it says
Is
that
this,
and then he's on to just be like, well, let's add this medication. Like, what the
yeah. And like 25 medications, knowing how much medications contraindicate, let me start that again, I'll be editing this out. Knowing how much medications contradict themselves at the best of times,
Yes.
25 just seems like such a potential for issues happening.
But then also 25, 7, huh? Huh? 25, 2 plus 5, 7.
Yep, yep. A
That was
spiritual
like,
amount of medication.
you're right. I was like, what the? It was exactly though. And I remember saying one time, I was like, so who all's checking? Like, because you guys can't agree. Like, so GI wouldn't agree with OBGYN on things. And OBGYN would say, what's going on is just your GI symptoms. So GI needs to be handling this. And then GI would be like, no, that's neurology's department, and so neurology needs to be handling this. And then neurology would say, well, no, this is only happening because your GI stuff isn't, you know what I'm saying? And so like nobody could get on this, but like everybody was giving me different medications for like their area of things. And then like psychology would be like, well, I'm still here doing my stuff, and But
Yeah, that separated system, I think we're starting to see how that just does not serve, like you just described, that there's like one hand not talking to the other, and
yeah,
the system is holistic that interacts in so many ways. So when we're just looking at, thyroid, just looking at gut, it's not painting the full picture.
the
And if
full,
if each of them are giving you a medication, yeah, it's
it was a hot mess.
yeah, yeah. I was trying to think of the correct way to say clusterfuck.
Yeah. Literally though. And then again, the cherry on top of it, right, was that nobody wanted to acknowledge the EDS. Nobody wanted to acknowledge. And then for that to be what it was the entire time, when little like 14-year-old me was like, what if it's Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome? And they're like, that's not a real thing. It's just in your head. Go talk to your psychologist. Like, yeah.
That's such a problematic thing with the medical industry. And I've had that in my own way too, where at 14 and at an early stage of interaction with the medical system, you're like, well, these people are doctors. They've studied for years. Look at them in
Right.
their like professional setting and like how much confidence they have. You that's got like this, sense that, no, I think it's this. Who am I to say that they're wrong?
Yeah.
And you listen to them for however long. And then at some point you realize, okay, that's why they call it an opinion, because
Hmm.
it's not that they have crystal clarity of this is exactly what's going on. And don't get me
Exactly.
wrong, I don't mean to diminish doctors or professionals in the medical industry,
Right.
but having, you know, confidence in yourself, and if you don't get a satisfying answer, trying to go to another. Now, the problem with that is, like you've experienced, you can spend so much time and money and energy trying to get that answer, and that can be the
Exhausting.
defeating thing that, like we said at the start of the podcast, the doctor or someone steps in with a flashy black and white answer. Oh, you've got EDS and the medical mainstream establishment's not looking after you. Pay 15 grand and I've got the solution for you.
Literally though, literally like and that's there. That is a component. Like, when you start trying to look outside of the regular doctors and healthcare things, like there is we we have it on both sides of the picture. So like it's not like it only exists with like the traditional white coats. That's not it. Outside of that, there is very much still those ones that are like, I see you're struggling with this, that, and third. But the thing for me that happened was like I got so fed up with it, and there was a full year and a half that like I canceled all of my doctor's appointment and I didn't see everyone for a full year, because not only that, like I found out that they were meddling with my records. Like I saw them edit some of my records and remove things from it. And so after that I was like, well, I don't trust any of y'all anymore at this point. You have effed it up too much. But through that process, it was also something that I think I needed so that I had to let go, because again, they had placed that fear, right, on me of like, if you're not here seeing us regularly, then like you're not going to be able to survive and make it. And like, it was never them or the medication that was sustaining me. Like, it was God's source universe. It was me. It was God's source universe working through me, They didn't do anything except put medicine in me. You know what I mean? And so that whole year of me being essentially like a very pissed off child, like that's what happened. Yeah, like I'm gonna keep it a buck hundred. It was just because like I was pissed off and I was like, I'm not dealing with you guys anymore. But that whole year of me being mad made me realize, like about 6 months in, I was like, hey, I haven't been to the doctors in 6 months and I'm okay. Like I'm a lot okay, and that was a thing for me. And after that 6 month mark, I started feeling like a lot more confident, on my own. It was kind of like coming out of the kiddie pool, and like putting on the floaty, like and getting in the actual pool at that point. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm still swimming, like I'm still above the
Yeah.
water. This is
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Something that comes to mind, there's a thing in like subconscious patterning, like there's the analogy of like the elephant that from a young age is tied to a stake with a chain around its leg. And then over the years, it realizes from pushing on the chain that it can't get any further. So when it gets bigger, they don't even need to have it staked and like chained. It just knows that, oh, I can't go beyond a certain point.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's almost what happened to you with the doctors telling you, no, if you move away from the mainstream medical system, you're not going to survive. And then at
Exactly.
6 month point, you're like, oh, actually, I can go beyond this.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this like it's like climbing beyond the ice wall. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
this is like this is me on the ever unexplored voyage of like trying to see, is there land here? Can I go over here? And but beyond that, it was this thing of me needing to realize that I didn't need in general, like I didn't need to be afraid, I didn't need to be confined. And also, but from another perspective, I understand, and it's not just with me, there's a reason why a lot of people with like very special spiritual gifts went through a lot of things that essentially kind of suppressed their spiritual gifts and abilities. And it is because, while there's not a ton of us here on this planet, that have I always say we're few but we're mighty, we're really powerful. And there was like a certain point in time where a lot of us had to be quote unquote asleep, because once we were awake, it set off that ascension thing, like a ripple effect, as there was a contractual point in time that the earth had to get to prior to that happening, before that could happen. So like us going through what we went through and being asleep for this amount of time was really very much by design, because it wasn't meant for us to prematurely start the domino effect of the changes that were meant to happen here on this planet. So like I understand it and see it from like the zoomed out perspective of why things happened the way that they did. And again, if I had to go through the things over again, I would, because like I said, it was a training ground, and it was things that I think it was rite of passage. It was initiation. It was, getting those stamps of approval, that really build character and give you that resilience that you need. Like I said earlier in the podcast, of right now more than ever, people needing to be able to not see, but feel what is real and authentic, because there's a lot of false perceptions, a lot of false people, prophets, leaders, gurus, guides, things of this nature out there that, are lurking in the deep, and are just looking for their next prey, their next victim. And if you're not able to feel and see, if you've not gone through, this process of having this awareness and abilities, like you're at risk of kind of falling into those things. So like I said, it was rough, but I appreciated it. The universe
yeah,
gives tough love.
100%. And
Yeah.
I think you touched on a really good point there, because ultimately, when you go through a cycle of being led into the wrong path, for lack of a better word, but, down through the manipulative, or, where someone's taking advantage of you, you do learn through that. But probably a more healthy way is to connect with your inner truth. And then from that place of stillness and depth within, you have better ability to recognize external truth, which is going to be a little bit easier on the self.
Exactly. Exactly. That introspection time is
Yeah,
crucial.
because I definitely, and that's again kind of coming back to the analogy of like what's kind of the easy path that promises things in the beginning versus what's going to be the more difficult, steady path.
Yeah.
Taking that time now to create space and stillness for yourself and to connect with your inner truth, look at your patterns, look at the realities or the truth within you, that can feel more difficult than be like, but hey, that person over there said they'd do that for me for 15 grand.
Yeah, yeah. But that person, like, what is that thing that they say? All that glitters is not gold.
Yeah, yeah, very apt.
It's
Absolutely.
that. And it's also I like to tell people, when you're going through things, it's really important to process your emotions and sit with like your pains and traumas soberly, because
Mm.
If you don't soberly, and I'm saying soberly because again, I did it the not soberly way a few times, and again, I had to repeat because that's not the right way. You have to sit with your pain and your traumas and your emotions and your feelings soberly, because if you don't, the universe will continue to send the same type of trigger or scenario or person to hurt you, or for you to go through again until you deal with it, acknowledge it, and process it correctly in
Yeah,
order for
absolutely.
you to clear it out so you can move on. That's really important. Like you will continuously get the same person over and over. Like obviously in a different body in a different form, because the universe knows what you like, right? In a same different body, but same soul essence until you learn what it is that you're meant to learn from that person and handle
Yeah.
it correctly.
Yeah, very true. It's helpful to look at it that way of what is the dynamic trying to teach you because yeah, you can try and manipulate the choice part, but yeah, until you kind of get that matrix of what is being brought up for you to face, I think the same thing keeps happening. And to your point about substance induced internal exploration, that can sometimes provide insight to your patterns. But what I've seen is often the people that have those moments of self awareness that occur through substances, especially like the stimulant based ones, it often isn't grounded and it
Hmm.
isn't embodied. So they can have psychedelics are a little bit of a different thing used in a particular way. I'm sure there's scope for them to create that introspection and help. But sometimes as a where we're going, people get a little bit too carried away with that and use them as a cure all. You know,
Right.
that they can be a part of your journey, but that doesn't mean they have to be. Like I definitely think, yeah, introspection, creating space for self and stillness is a better path than, just being like, oh, well, I'm going to do like mushrooms once a
I'm
week
gonna
and
do.
that's
Right.
good.
Like, I'm constant. I said this to someone and it struck a nerve, and I'm sorry. Like, y'all can be mad at me if you want, but like, it's the if you're just constantly high, you not there. You not there. You not there, man. And like that's just what it is. Like, again, you be mad all you want, but that's the truth. You're that's escapism, is avoidance, and you're not dealing with your actual reality. Like, if you feel like you have to escape all the time.
Yeah. And even if it's like someone thinks that they need to supplement their state with a substance to achieve a level of normality, because the problem is if you, let's say, even just cannabis, you're doing it all the time, initially it feels like an altered state. Done constantly, that becomes your normal state. And
That's it.
then being sober becomes an altered state. And if you're then at that point where you're reliant on a substance to feel normal, I agree, you're not there.
You not there. You not there. And like again, like I said, y'all can fight me if you want, but like this is the and that's what I tell people. Like, if you people, my people come to me knowing exactly the fact that I'm gonna tell you not what you want to hear, but like the truth and what actually is effing you up, and like what's holding you back, and where you're being limited, where you're, because a lot of times it's you, like you're the problem. Like you're sabotaging yourself in some way, whether you cognitively or not, and that's a thing. And I will absolutely be the one to be like, hey, look, this is what it is. And more times than not, like people will come to me and be actively high, and I'm like, are you high right now? Yeah, like I'm like, bro, this is the issue. Like, what do you think we're gonna accomplish while you're super out of it? Like, I'm always like this. Issue number
100%.
two here. And again, that's fine. Like, we have to start somewhere, but like, don't get mad at the fact of, I'm telling you, that's not it. Again, I was there. I went through a phase of, I tell everyone, like, I went in my shadow phase, but I just did it really fast. I gave myself 2 years to be like, F it. And I was like down in Patron every day. And that was like, I was. But again, I didn't stay there because that wasn't it. Like that was not the thing. Like I was just like a lot of people are just hurting and going through a lot of really rough shit, and they just don't want to feel it and deal with it. And again, I understand that, but you can't escape the abyss that way. You
Yeah.
can't. And the only way over it is through it. The only way out of it is feeling it and dealing with it and healing it. Like you can't just be like, well, I'm not feeling this, and this happened to me today, and so I'm gonna go out and drink a whole bunch of alcohol and get a whole bunch of pills and get effed up tonight, and that's gonna be what I'm gonna do, and that's just rinse, repeat, and do it over and over again. That's not it. That's
Yeah,
not
it
it.
gives you a momentary escape where you feel a sense of relief that, there was all this crushing weight of problems and internal state that now I don't have to deal with for that short amount of time. But often while under the influence, it creates more problems. And at the
Yeah.
very least, the ones that you're not facing start to compound.
Yeah, and that was definitely my realization. And again, like I feel like I'm just an odd one in general, but like every time that I would be super drunk, I would write down, how do I feel? What am I experiencing? What did I go through? And I would document the next morning or the next day. I'd be like, most of my worst decisions happened while I was drunk. I did, like, again, my level of introspection and self-awareness has always been there, like top tier. And it is true. The worst decisions of my life every time that I was drinking. And that's why I was like, this ain't for me.
Yeah. Well, having that awareness would definitely help curve that, because a lot of people take so long to realize that by making bad decisions, if you can be acutely aware of that, or at least, like within a day,
Yeah.
it's going to really, because I think once you do understand something, even if it doesn't take place right away, over
Yeah.
time, when you know, okay, this is what I would like to be doing and this is not what I would like to be doing, you
Exactly.
do eventually start to model your behavior towards what you want to do. It's
Yeah.
just when you refuse to look at it at all and you don't even realize.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it is. A lot of people, and again, it goes back to your point of saying, a lot of people's altered state has become their normal, and so like I think that's why like a lot of people will tell me like you're just really intimidating to come through. Nah, it's just because I see you like at the soul level. Like I see you in your weaknesses. I see where your wounds are. I see where your traumas are at. I can see on the multiple different timelines where you have left parts of yourself. And most of the time, the parts of yourself that are left hurt and damaged are from early childhood times. So there's like a lot of inner childhood wound healing that I try to help people through, and at least bring up to acknowledge, because it's not me doing the work. I just bring the stuff to like I just
Surface.
correct. Like I just tell them, hey, this is what's going on. And I tell them, this is what you need to work on. And this is what hey, you got your work cut out for you here, but it's possible. Right. But it's this of trying to show people and get them to acknowledge, man, look, this is what's happening. You're kind of really effing the progress here, because you don't know that this is not normal. This is
Yeah.
this is not normal.
And that's the challenge of it, isn't it? Like, one, it's good that you have that approach, because if you come to someone for help, you want to be hearing the truth.
Right. But a lot of
And
people don't want to hear the truth.
no. And the other part is, when you're so early on your journey, you can see the mountain ahead of you sometimes, and that can be daunting. And you're like, well, that's a bit
Ugh.
too much. I'm just not going to deal with it. But the problem is, it tends to get bigger over time, or at least if you started now, you'd be on the way and making progress.
Yeah, I wrote that today in a blog post that I made, and I said, where, I try to tell people that I understand, I understand being from that perspective where I was at, where I was like, I feel like I'm in too deep to change now. And I get that. I think that's a lot of people's perspectives as well. When I say that I meet people like where they're at in even at the challenger deep, at the deepest, the ultimate abyss point, that's fine. Like I've been there, but a lot of people, their response to me is like, I'm just in too deep. Like, I mean, yeah, we deep. Yeah, we in here, but like it is possible, you just have to be willing to do the work, and it's the work on yourself. It's investing in yourself. You have to be okay with doing the work to heal yourself and investing on your journey, like not monetarily investing on your journey, but like pouring into yourself.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the part. You have to be willing to make you a priority, not substances, not the addictions. Like you have to come first. Your well-being has to come first.
Totally. And I think it's helpful when people can shift from a binary perspective instead of being like, I'm unhealthy, I want to get to healthy, or like, I'm unhealed, I'm not going to be able to get to healed. And
Right.
seeing how it's actually a spectrum, a continuum where it's like, well, instead of just thinking, you could spend a year working on your stuff and not be healthy, could you be better than where you are now? And
Right.
how would that make you feel? And is that worth doing?
Yeah. I give the question often, do you think you're worth it?
Mm,
And
yeah.
like it's heartbreaking to hear like a lot of people will say, "No, I don't." And I'm like, that's fair. Like cuz again, I was there. Like I never doubted once God source universe, but a lot of times I doubted myself and I gave up on myself a lot of times. So like it was never me giving up on God source universe or my faith, but a lot of times like I didn't think like my self-worth, especially after, being in my 2 years of like making unaligned decisions. I'd be like, "Oh, I shouldn't have hooked up with that person or this that and the third." The that regret state that you're in. There was a lot of times where I was like, nah, like I don't think, I get that. So when people say it to me now, like I understand and I'm like, it's heartbreaking for me. Usually I cry with them or for them, like because I'm like, I see myself in everybody, and so I get it, but you are worth it, and I wish that was something that I try to be what I needed at the time that I didn't have, so I try to be that for other people. I wish that was something that other people would have told me, when I was in the abyss of like, hey, this isn't you, you're let's look, come on, let's get on the track, and I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. How can I help you? But like frequently you have so many people around you that have no problem supporting you staying down, but you don't have that many people that want to help you rise up around you, and I think the most difficult part for a lot of the most difficult part for a lot of people is separating their old comrades, buddies, women, like their circle from them, because that circle of people that you have with you around you in the abyss, there's no shortage of the people that want to help you stay down. Like there's no shortage of the people that want to like have random sex with you. There's no shortage of the people that want to turn up with you and party with you and do unaligned choices and decisions with you. Like there's never any shortage. And I when I was there like turning up all the time, I think that was the most popular that I ever was. Honestly, that was the most popular time of my life. And like I'm very introverted, but that was, my phone was never dry. There was all, you know what I'm saying? Like there was
Yeah.
guys all the time. But like the moment that I was like enough no more, like, crickets. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the amount of things that people supported me doing, people would pay good money to be like, "Oh, you want to make destructive decisions? Well, you let me fund that." But
Yeah.
if you tell somebody, I want to start a business, they're like, like, I'm not giving you money for that. But if it's anything that's an unaligned decision where they're like, sure, you need money for that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that can be a real tricky dynamic and one that I think is quite universal. The people that are in that chaotic state, and especially something I think defines them is like a bit of a selfish approach where they're like, I like partying with Stacia, like, yeah, like come around, like, and there's the self-interest of they get value from you. And like from a conscious level, they're like, yeah, like she's fun, like she's a cool person. I enjoy that.
yeah,
But there's a lack of focus on what would be in your highest interest. And they're more looking at, I get enjoyment from her as a good person. So I'm willing to create that situation. But then what I think is a better connection is when you have growth friends where people are
right.
like, they don't need to be around you all the time. You might go a year without connecting, but when you connect back, it's as it was because you've got that mutual respect. And
Yeah,
you're like, I'm going to go do this and work on myself. And they're like, yeah, totally. Like, you've got my blessing.
yeah,
And I think the challenge is when you step away from the kind of initial kind of selfish type friends,
hmm,
you can feel a lack of loyalty because, often people that are wanting to, you know, go into a growth stage do have loyalty and like, or the other side can be not wanting to be alone. You're like, oh, well,
Exactly.
without these people, I'm going to be by
I'm
myself.
nothing. I can't. Yes.
Yeah. But what I've found is when you choose to accept that reality and find that you like your own company and
Mm,
then you don't need people, that's when you can actually attract people that are at a higher level. I guess that's probably why many people choose to stay with that same first friendship group is because they're
yeah.
not yet at a place where they like themselves.
Yeah, exactly that. And like it again, I understand it again from the first hand perspective of it, but I try to tell people it does get better. Like, yeah, you have to go through kind of that slightly isolation phase thing, because you have to get to know you. You have to spend time
Yep.
with you,
Yep.
and
100%.
and that's the most. I had this one guy tell me, he's like, that's I know, and that's why I don't want to do it. And he was like, I'm not ready for that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to face myself. And I tell people that like death and judgment day is not what people think. Like, again, having experienced death multiple times, both physically and spiritually, death and judgment. Like, the judgment day is not what like people think, where like some guy in a robe comes and sits down next to you and is like, can you tell me why you did this on December 3rd of 1950? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what happened. Like, look, at least for me, that's not what happened. But I'm just, what happens, like the proverbial judgment day is that time while you are in that death of your old self phase, and you go into the judgment, like the holding room, the transitional space from like old life to the path of ascension, to your destined path area, the little void zone. You have to sit with yourself and the decisions that you have made and the feelings that you have suppressed, be it from whatever substances and things. And no matter how many times you try to like escape that time, God, source, universe will continuously do things to make sure that you go through that time of introspection somehow. Like, it's gonna be different for everybody, but like, you gonna have that introspection time as soon as you get your foot through the door of this process. It's gonna happen. And that is like, that's the scary part for a lot of people. That's the scary part for a lot of people, where they don't want to, to start the process, because like I said, the one guy was like, I've done too much. He's like, it's just he's like, it's just a lot. Like, I've wronged a lot of people, and I don't, and I'm like, I get it, but we gotta unpack that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the nail on the head. The willingness to face what are the feelings that your actions have brought up. And
yeah,
that can be either what you've done to others or what you've allowed to happen to yourself.
or both.
And yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's certainly the difficult part of the journey. And I think that's where that space for stillness that I keep speaking about is so key, because it's from that space where those things come up. And that's
Yeah.
why so many people get caught in momentum, productivity. Oh, I've got to be doing the next thing. I can't stop, because it's those feelings that are going to come up during that time.
Exactly. Jeremy, literally this at 9 a.m. this morning, I wrote this blog post about exactly what, talk about divine alignment, like literally of exactly what you just said, of this is why a lot of people do this whole like, I need to constantly be busy. I need to constantly be doing, like, they leave themselves maybe 2 or 3 hours to sleep throughout a day, 5 hours if at that, maybe, like that's exuberant for a lot of people. But like, they constantly need to be working three, four, five, six, seven jobs. And if they're not doing a job, they're doing like a side project. And if they're not doing that, they got a whole bunch of kids or whatever it is, to just make sure that there's never like a gap in the clock that's not filled with them having to do something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we can both agree more stillness is definitely needed. I wanted to talk about your book that you've launched. Congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks, thanks, thanks.
So what's it titled?
It is the New Earth Guidebook to Healing and Ascension.
Awesome. So, what can you tell me about it?
Yeah, so it essentially discusses everything that we've pretty much talked about everything from some of the physical symptoms that you might, I say might because not everybody's going to have the exact same thing or go the exact same route, but some of the things that you might physically experience if you are dealing with unacknowledged traumas, or when you start this ascension and healing process, what may come up, what you can expect along this path is I tell people that it's like if you started a new job, they would hand you the guidebook of like what's expected of you, okay, like welcome to the first day on the job. Here's what is expected of you, your roles and things of that nature, but then also, kind of the I weaved in there kind of some firsthand experience things of what I've gone through and what my process personally was like. So it has the kind of the boring stuff of like what shadow work is in there, and then it has the good mix of my personal experience things, but it's a super easy, very straightforward. It's not very long. Like I said, it's a guidebook, so like it's not a novel. I think it's like 120 pages, if at that. So it's not really long and very straightforward, very great for the neurodivergent mind. And it gets just straight to the point of the things that you need to know along this path. And a lot of what we've already talked about of needing to do some of the chapters in it is inner childhood wound healing and dealing with trauma and acknowledging your traumas and doing shadow work and, what is ascension and kind of what ascension symptoms could be like for you. And then I have like some affirmations and thing in there. They're actually my personal affirmations that I wrote when I was going through my process. Like I just journaled and noted a whole bunch of thing in my iPhone for everything that I was going through. And I really did just put it in there, because that's what helped me. Everyone asked me, well, like, what did you do? So I just put some of them in there, and then also some of the self-care rituals and things that I do in it that have helped me. And then there's a chapter on the art of spiritual warfare because that is what we're going through, So
Sounds amazing.
yeah, but like I tried to make it not a frills and fluff thing because I just feel like we have enough of that out there in the world, and that's not me. In general, I'm a person that's like, tell me what I need to know, and that's it. Like, stop with this. What is all of this?
Yeah,
What do I really need to know? And so
yeah,
I tried to just make it that.
that's amazing. And this is super inspirational for me because I've actually been putting together a book for a while, and it's
Ooh,
very, very similar in what you were saying. I was like, you're speaking to me right now because
he's speaking.
it came together really quickly. But then I got to a certain point, and I have this pattern of like, I'll map out like an incredibly detailed structure, and I'll get like a fair way through a bit, but then I just can't like exert that much energy to complete what I've mapped out.
Yeah.
Biting off more than I can chew is probably the way of simplifying it. But I'll show you after the podcast like a bit of the book that I've been working on. So yeah, you've given me a lot from you sharing what you've done and created there to yeah, step
Yeah.
into my own project there.
And do the thing. Yeah. But also again, I think what helped me was that I didn't have that expectation. Like I said, I started it as it was gonna be one thing. And then God Source Universe just took over and was like, no, we're doing this. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
okay. And
yeah,
I didn't have an end goal in mind. I just let it become whatever it was going to be. And then I worked through it until it felt like it was done. And then I stopped. And then that was it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Listening to that flow is so key. So
Yeah.
well done.
What sign are you?
Scorpio.
Scorpio and
Lots.
Virgos get along very well.
Yeah, lots of birth and redeath, but fuck,
Death and
struggling.
rebirth.
Thank you. The 7 a.m. time here in Bali's starting to show. Dear Lord.
Yeah, but that is your health, Scorpio, eighth house of death and rebirth
And
and
I'm a
mystery.
Scorpio sun and moon, and then I've got two other Scorpio placements as well.
What?
Yeah,
How is that?
Yeah, intense.
Do you feel like people are intimidated by you?
I've got a pretty open and like calming energy. A real big thing for me is making other people feel safe.
Yeah.
So I tend to, I think on an immediate perception, like before I speak, there could be a level of intimidation. But then when I actually engage with others, I'm like very soft energy. So then no.
What's your rising, do you know?
Gemini.
Interesting. So that's
Bit
why
of
you're
a,
able to communicate well.
yeah, it would
Yeah.
seem so.
Yeah.
Intellectual stimulation and a bit of adventure.
Yeah.
So it's probably a
Wow.
good compliment,
Yeah, it is.
good complementary rising sign.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
And where can people find your book?
On Amazon.
Okay,
Amazon.
cool. And so what was it called?
The New Earth Guidebook to Healing and Ascension.
By Stashia Jeanette?
Jeanette. Yeah. Or Stashia Jeanette Avery is on there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll put a link in the podcast description too.
Cool. Sounds good.
Awesome. And where can people connect with you on
Yeah, so I have a website that has essentially everything on it. It's just ascensionoraclev.com. And then my Instagram is ascensionoraclev LLC. And there's like a booking link that's on the actual Instagram as well if people want to connect with me. And then I have a Patreon that people can join to see like the Oracle videos or live streams of things of this nature.
Yeah, sweet. I'll put the links in the description of the podcast too.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for a lovely conversation that had lots of synchronicity. It's always a
Yes.
good sign.
Yes. Listen, divine connections. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool. Well, there we go. Thank you for being on the Chi podcast.
Bye, guys.